2012, the release of the dystopian film The Hunger Games had a major impact on the young adult film landscape. Kids wore heroine Katniss Everdeen's Jennifer Lawrence, side braid to school, and always had a book from the critically acclaimed trilogy, written by author Suzanne Collins, on hand. The film also helped set off a brief but saturated period of fantasy films that portrayed a cruel world that forced young people to fight for their mere survival. Many series that painted this harsh picture, like the Maze Runner and Divergent, were released within the short, dystopian film era. By 2018, the intense demand for these YA stories had disappeared almost completely and moved into other types of coming-of-age stories. The excessive depiction of various dystopian worlds may have been fleeting, but it undoubtedly had its moment. What brought about the era of YA dystopian films in the first place, and why did it end? With the recent boost of nostalgia following the release of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, will the subgenre have a resurgence? Most of the dystopian era was made up of book-to-film adaptations. The films produced during this era of film were far from the first dystopian films to be made. The first movie of its kind is considered to be Fritz Lang's Metropolis, and has since been followed by a plethora of classics. One key factor of previous dystopian films that is similar to the 2010s dystopian film period is that most of these movies were adapted from novels. Some of your favorite futuristic stories on screen, such as Blade Runner, A Clockwork Orange, and V for Vendetta, were books or graphic novels beforehand. However, the biggest difference between pre-2000 classics and the ones from the 2010s dystopian frenzy was the target demographic: young people. One of the most prominent causes of this phenomenon that had everyone running to movie theaters was the love that dystopian and fantasy YA novels were getting in the years leading up to it. Book series like Maximum Ride and Mashed were fuel to the fire for avid readers. Dystopian novels sometimes had fantasy elements, but always followed protagonists that needed their wits, resourcefulness, and quick thinking in order to survive unforgiving circumstances. Whether it be world-destroying monsters or a cutthroat government system that watches their every move. These series often included romantic plots, as well as commentary on real-life events and society. Thus began the obsession with dystopian YA films. The release of Gary Ross' The Hunger Games off the phenomenon and was followed by other book-to-film adaptations like Ready Player One, The Fifth Wave, The Giver, The Maze Runner, Divergent, and more. The latter two, as well as The Hunger Games, continued as franchises, as their respective book series intended. The films were met with raging success, until they weren't.